Hello, and welcome to this week's exciting edition of Victory Never Sleeps. We have a cool and I think a really interesting topic tonight. So, as you guys have all been paying attention to, we have recently acquired our fifth Hoff, Hoff, located in lovely Austintown, Ohio. We will be dedicating this Hoff on the 6th of December. We would like for you to join us for said dedication. So make plans today. It's a lovely Hoff. It's a very convenient location. This should be really great. We've got a lot of folks planning to attend. I believe the Lawspeaker is planning to attend. I will definitely be in attendance. Our founder and his wife, Githia McNallen, will both be in attendance.
All right.
So, yeah, this is a once in forever opportunity to be at the dedication of this Hoff. So I would highly encourage you to do so if you are able. If you're interested, please contact your local folk builder or any of our folk builders for that matter, and we can get you all set up. Speaking of Hoff, so I appreciate everybody. You guys have really been amazingly generous, and we are very thankful for it. Just to let folks know, we are sitting at 25.1% paid off, and we have not even dedicated the Hoff yet. So that is a tremendous, tremendous effort. We appreciate you guys. And if you are interested, I think Nick will put up a link here, but you can donate at runestone.org. And we would appreciate anything you guys can do. But you guys are awesome. Thank you so much. Speaking of, GW Farnsworth started out by donating $25 to this program and also $25 to our current folk services fundraiser for a family that is going through some struggles, and we appreciate you helping out. So thank you very much. Trying to think if there's any top of the program news for you guys. I don't think that there is, other than it was really cool last week to celebrate our founder's birthday with you guys on here, and all of the birthday wishes and appreciation was much appreciated by him. I was with him this weekend as we celebrated Veternighter, did that at all of our Hoffs, and pretty astounding event across the AFA. So we're riding a good tide here, but I spoke to him, and he really appreciated getting the opportunity to speak to you guys and to do the episode. So thank you guys for that. To set the stage, Lawspeaker, can you tell people what Mouse Utopia is?
Well, yes. And this is, I'm not really sure. I guess I can stand over the banner. Not really sure how much this has to do with adulting, but it is a topic that I like to talk about, and so we can just tough it out for one night, a couple hours. So Mouse Utopia, and I had the guy's name, Calhoun. There was a psychiatrist named Calhoun, and he, should I be up over, center up over? Like, I feel like
I think there's a technical difficulty going on the producer's end, so I'm checking on that.
Okay. So there was a psychiatrist named Calhoun, and back in the 60s, I think it was, he did an experiment where he took a gymnasium-sized mouse enclosure, just built it, plexiglass, and all these layers of stuff that mice need. He filled it with an unlimited supply of space, unlimited bedding, unlimited food, and put 6 or 8 pairs of mice in there and let them start doing what mice do. And so they reproduced exponentially, as you might expect. There was nothing in there but mice and food and space. So for a long time, the mouse population exploded. At some point, then the mice started displaying a lot of aberrant behavior. They started turning homosexual, many of them. They started displaying behavior that mice don't usually do. Mice are nocturnal creatures, but many of the mice started coming out during the day when other mice were not around. Some mice were sleeping 22 hours a day. Other mice were walking around in gangs and attacking other mice. And it got down to a point where, and Calhoun called these the beautiful mice. Like at some point, there was a mate selection that where they were living even in abnormal pairs. Normally, mice are kind of, at least during the nesting period, they are, I guess, serially monogamous. They, the two parents make a little nest and they take care of the little mouselets. But what was happening is 3, 4, 5 male mice were going with one female mice. And so the chaos that was created in there just disrupted mouse behavior patterns. It disrupted, obviously, something. It's hard to, is it right to say something deep in the mouse psychology was fundamentally askew. And again, it was at a population saturation much less than the elements would have supported. There was still plenty of room. There was still plenty of food. There's still plenty of bedding, but many of the mice just stopped breeding. Many of the mice were displaying all of these aberrant behaviors where they were not acting like normal mice. And long before the food ran out, long before the space ran out, the mice all stopped breeding. And at the end of the experiment, there were no mice in the enclosure. They all stopped breeding and died out. And so the question then has been pondered for quite some time. Then, what happened to these mice? What happened in their little brain in there to switch off all those natural behaviors? And I spent way too much time thinking about this analysis, but so what does that have to do with anything? All right. So what I think, and feel free to engage the debate. What I think that is, and the reason that this is important in our analysis of what's going on in Western civilization as a whole, is I think that all of this wokeism, transgenderism, the rampant homosexuality, the lack of normal breeding associations, is all this kind of this virus. It's a mind virus that is permeating Western civilization. And in the exact same way that the mice were doing it at a more animalistic level, we are susceptible at some upper level, like in our upper function. We see there are too many people. We see there is too much population of not necessarily of our people, but of like worldwide. There are too many people. There's population pressure, even though there's still a lot more resource out there. So I think the abnormalities that we see in a lot of what, for lack of a better term, we might call coupling behavior. I think that a lot of that is the psychology of this phenomenon being played out in Western civilization. And the reason I wanted to talk about this tonight for us, for our people, is I think if we identify that as a phenomenon that is out there in civilization at large, that we, Asatru, can overcome it internally by being able to name the problem, and that we can, the term that immediately comes to mind is get over ourselves for 5 minutes, and realize that it is important for us to have little Asatru to continue on the worship of the gods. That also ties in with the other half of this discussion to me, which is other half, like the other third. But there's another part of this idea that is also a well-known phenomenon in ecology studies. And I apologize, I got a little bit of a cold. But ecological professors. Sorry, I'm being gifted with a gift of tea. Thank you, baby. Ooh, ah. So, thank you. So the RK theory, right? RK theory, and for whatever reason, it's a small r and a slash and a capital K. RK theory, and what RK theory is about it's about the idea that some animals have lots and lots of babies and invest very little in their upbringing, like mice or rabbits or frogs or alligators to a lesser extent. But if you have during your lifetime, if you have, not you, but like if an animal has 30, 60, 80, 100 young, then all they need to do is if one or two of them survive, then that animal will continue into the future. And so that's our theory. Like it's where you have lots and lots of babies and don't put very much resource into those, into the raising of any one child. But then K theory is the opposite. K theory, people with I keep saying people, I mean animals. People are animals. But K theory is the opposite. You have very few children, but you invest a lot of resources into their growth and development. And like the classical example in ecology is the elephant. An elephant only reproduces, I think it takes 2 years for them to come to term. And then they have a long childhood and adolescence. I mean, it takes them to be 13, 15, 20 years old before they are sexually active. And so elephants have this long, slow reproductive cycle, but their young is cared for by all the elephants in the herd, and they all invest a lot in teaching the young elephants how to act, what to eat, what not to eat, where to find water, all those sorts of things. So what does that have to do with anything, right? What it has to do with is that Western civilization has traditionally been K theory, right? We have few children. I mean, as Tacitus, I know everybody says Tacitus, but as Tacitus pointed out, we wait to get married. We wait to have children until we're established. That's always been like the Germanic pattern. We have very few children and invest a lot of resources into their upbringing. There are other tribes, let's say, that reproduce using the opposite theory. They have lots and lots of kids, but they don't put very much resource into the raising of those kids. And so the problem then comes in, right, where you have the mixing of those two types of reproduction theory. Like if you have people who care deeply about their children's education and want to see them get 16 years of education so they can get a college degree, or get even just 12 years of decent high school education, middle school education, so that they can, as Jethro Bodine used to say, read and write and cipher some, and have some basic idea of history and the way that the world works. You can't mix those people with those who are engaging a different reproductive strategy, because it causes friction, right? You can't have mice and wolves living in the same compound.
Not for long.
Part.
I said not for long.
Not for long. Well, and you would. So then you get into this idea. Well, won't the wolves eat the mice? Yes, the wolves will eat the mice until the wolves get infected with a different sort of mind virus that tells them it's wrong to eat mice, and that you should forgive the mice for being lesser beings, and you should help the mice because they have just as much right to get in there and eat some of the moose carcass as the wolves do. And so, and I realize I'm mixing four metaphors into this stew here, but what I'm coming around to saying, right, is a couple things. One, we the AFA, are trying to set up a community, something that looks like the start of an intentional community up in Tennessee near Ciderheim. I would like to engage that project at a deep and profound level so that we can put the fence up and keep the mice out. If that, to put that metaphor in there. Even if we could get several of us moved up there so that we can scare the mice off, that would be equally as effective as as raising walls. But those are the sorts of things that number one, that we should be considering when we're thinking about our long-term prospects. Number two, and I know I was lucky and stumbled into a decent slot where I could parent 3 fine, strapping young men. But we should be, because ultimately evolution and the long-term prospects of our folk are limited by our ability to propagate ourselves. So, I mean, this is another way to say I have great respect for all those who take the time and trouble to have 2, 3, 5 children. 1 is great. 5, 6, 7, is that much better. So we, meaning y'all who have not done your duty to the folk, need to start pair bonding, realizing, and see, this too is part of this mix that comes in here to me, is, we have this idea from the entertainment industry. And I think that idea has been I think it has altered people's perception of how relationships work, right? I mean, you can go to a movie and they have some great big problem and they solve it all and everybody lives happily ever after, and it's all done in an hour and a half. But that's not how life is. It's not how it works out here in the real world. People are not perfect. I'm not perfect. Got news for you, listener. You're not perfect either, viewer. So I hate to say it quite this way, but this is sort of the right way to say it, is that you need to be realistic about your standards, right? You're not going to marry Cheryl Teagues or I'm aging myself.
I was going to say, if you did, she would not be of breeding age.
Okay, Britney Spears or whoever it is. That's the what's the girl that's in trouble now because she has good genes. You know what I'm talking about. She's in the ad.
Brie Larson. No, not her.
Sydney Sweeney.
Yep.
There you go. Sweeney, you're not, that's outside the range of even me, probably. So
you say it ain't so.
So, I guess that's what I'm aiming for, and what I sort of had in mind when I when I thought of this topic for the episode, is ignore the idiotic pressures around out there that, where all these blue-haired freaks are saying there are too many people. There are too many people, but there are not enough of the right people. So it's not just the absolute number of people. It's the distribution. Okay. So find a woman, settle down, have some kids.
Solid advice.
I'll give you some advice in that vein if it ever helps. You can call me.
There you have it, folks. So this is a cool topic for a lot of reasons, because in a microcosm, it points out lots of different paths that we can go down on lessons learned from it, or lessons demonstrated in it, I suppose. In going back to the Mouse Utopia for a moment, when we've all heard the thing that good men create good times create weak men create bad times create good men. In this cycle, you have something very similar at play. When there's no struggle to your life and everything is very easy to accomplish, a nihilism and a pointlessness sets in, to where you end up, or I say you, where beings end up in an existential crisis because they don't have the natural forces working on them that would compel them to do the things. So they find creative ways to utilize their time and their energy. When we're all hungry and cold, we don't have any confusion on whether boys have a penis and girls have a vagina. We all understand that. But when we don't, and we've got to let's reshuffle the deck. Let's, discard everything that we've learned about Western civilization, because let's try something new. It really displays in strange ways, and we're laughing, but as this is something to have laughed about in the 1990s, it is shockingly real in the world around us today. And I think one of the big challenges, because I don't think we want to artificially create, some kind of life or death needs on things, but it challenges us specifically as Aryan noble people to figure out what that means. The world around us has degraded all of the things that were once celebrated as noble and as things one would devote their life to, purposes that were worthy of spending your life trying to attain, trying to serve. And when I say we, I mean Western civilization scoffs at glory or dignity or,
honor.
honor or creating empire, creating legacy, serving king and country. Those things are all, at best, fun historical endeavors for you to read about, or, at worst, the evil sins of the oppressor. And it's created an existential struggle for people to where they don't try that hard because they don't have to. Our challenge is to still try hard, even when we don't have to, technically, to find meaning in the things that we do in life and to restore value to things like glory and honor and dignity and celebration of race and of nation and of things. So that is, and I mentioned there's something that we return to on the program often, but with a little bit different guys. Our people spin out on, so if you're an NPC, you can just go through life and consume the stuff that's there because there's an abundance of stuff to consume. There's an abundance of distraction, and you can just kind of drift along and be an airhead that drifts along on things. But once you're aware, only the most base people can be aware and then somehow retreat back into ignorance. Once you're aware of the things that are wrong, it becomes oppressive when you don't see outlets to fix the big macro things we see wrong in society. And so I think a lot of people spend a lot of time beating themselves up mentally about that, or eventually burning themselves out and embracing, throwing up their hands and becoming like the strange, degenerate mice. The AFA provides a very special and very specific solution to that. We are rebuilding a community of people who do care about those things, who are spending our lives in pursuit of the things that are noble and things that are good, are doing things that our ancestors would recognize and respect and appreciate. In the AFA, you have the ability to do deeds that gain the notice of the gods and hopefully gain, their being proud of you, their acknowledging the work that you've done. You have the opportunity to help hundreds, thousands of our people to live better, to raise themselves up, to accomplish and to succeed. I mentioned about Phrasehoff. That's our fifth Hoff for a relatively small number of people who are engaged in being pious and caring about what we do and, sticking around for years and decades dedicated to something. We're able to accomplish really great things. There's a lot that can be done if we put our focus towards it. But it's very easy to be lulled into a spot where you don't want to risk all of the comforts that you have to try big endeavors. And so instead you waste time doing nothing. An anecdote, number of people I went to high school with, actually, but very specifically one in particular. He suffered from, like, he was too smart for his own good. One of the smartest people I ever met. Didn't have goals or ambitions that he knew how to put a finger on or decide on. And I think that, lots of people can be forgiven for not knowing what they want to be when they grow up, quote unquote, when they're in high school. But very shortly after high school, he had some relative pass and he inherited some money. And then he had, something sounds like it's out of a movie. Some guy that he met that gave him some really hot stock tip. and he rolled the dice on it, and he hit big. When I say big, not like limousines and jets and, whatever, but that's the problem. He hit the just enough big. Here, we graduated in 99, 26 years later, still got money off of that he's existing on. He's not living the high life, but again, with very little ambitions, he's got enough to eat, enough to have a roof over his head, and enough to have an internet subscription or whatever. So he didn't really have that thing that forces people to have to make a decision and do something with themselves. And so he didn't. And there's a lot of time and a lot of years and a lot of missed opportunity because he lived in a very, very comfortable prison of his own situation and the ease and comfort that he found himself in. And that's really unfortunate. Know a lot of people that way. We've got a lot of things that are made tremendously easier, so we don't have the same things pushing us to be successful. I think the same is true. Alan mentioned, go out, find yourself a mate, and make some babies. There was a time to where that being a necessity and not having workarounds like, internet dating or pornography or other things to vent natural urges towards, that you had to go out and make something of yourself. You had to find a way to be appealing, even if you weren't like the supermodel guy. You would find stuff to show and demonstrate worth and demonstrate capability. You would have to go do these things. You'd have to get outside of your comfort zone and ascend to something in order to get these things accomplished. Well, now folks don't. One of the things that, is also a modern phenomenon. They've done studies and tried to figure it out with all of the easy access to hookup culture and all these hookup apps. You would think that more guys than ever are out there, engaging in sexual adventures. That tends to not be the case statistically. It's the same very small percent of naturally high value guys. They're just getting more and more and all of the women. It doesn't really make that work because guys that would have found their worth doing other great things don't try. That's why you get other aberrant things like men go their own way or whatever this intentional celibatism is and these other gay adjacent things. And that's really unfortunate, but I see that affect a lot of our people. Necessity really is that thing in life that spurs people on to have to make decisions and have to choose a path and do things. Another person that was a one time a friend of mine told me that, the roads are paved with, the carcasses of squirrels that couldn't make a decision. You have people perpetually in the middle of the road wondering which way to go until the car runs them over. So yeah, those are any of a number of things that come out of the situation that we find ourselves in our own, human utopia, in air quotes.
Right. No, and you've touched on all the stuff that, why I brought this topic up. You're exactly right. High value men manage to bag or whatever you call it. Lots and lots of women because they're all competing for the same few men, and it devalues both those men and those women, and that has a direct parallel with the beautiful mice who were the last few breeding pairs there in Mouse Utopia, where they were breeding together, but then eventually even they stopped breeding, which is exactly what's happening here. All these, and one of the dating phenomena that's been studied is that men in a dating app they rate women as a range. Like there's 2s, 4s, 6s, eights, tens occasionally. But women, when they're rating guys, you're either a 9 or a 2, and they don't illustrate anything in between. And I think that's that selection culture that women have this idea that a guy has to be beautiful and wealthy before he rates anything over a 3. And they've lost the idea, and we can spend a lot of time, and many sociologists have, pondering why it is that women have gotten that idea in their heads. So they throw themselves at these guys that they think are high status, that are really just good-looking morons, and and then engage in behavior that they deplore when men do it, and rightly so. So, then they end up in their middle years living out that desperate loneliness of the career woman, where they, because a career doesn't hug you tight at night, and a career doesn't need you in the same way that that a baby does. There's just nothing else that takes the place of that strategy that says, I can find a good middleman who's going to make a good middle class living, and we can have lots and lots of happy little heathen kids together.
Well, and it's so seductive too, because the proposition in a more natural environment and in an Aryan society where you begin removing the desperate struggle of life and evolving that into high ideals and high aspirations, things come with that. And we don't realize those things. So the career, the career woman path provides just enough, like you can make enough to where you have a roof over your head and where you got stuff to eat. And it doesn't occur until you're already, knee deep in it, and like, oh, well, then what? And I think the same thing with a lot of the things that guys had to do. Like, I don't want to have to go toil for, every calorie I get so that I can maybe make it through the winter or whatever. Of course, none of us want that. But in doing that, generations past had to learn skills that got them there. They had to develop competency and confidence. They had to develop a wide variety of things that add, the value to existence that a lot of folks lack today. So finding
and they
ways,
got to see the value of honest work.
Mhm.
Where so much now is, sitting in an office pushing paper around or pushing internet streams around.
Mhm.
It's very different from a physical location where, like, you can see the barrel maker and what he contributes to the overall well-being of the community in the exact same way that the farrier does, and the milkmaid and all that stuff. It used to be that there was a very visceral connection between all of these trades, and so we've lost that idea that even by doing a little, you're doing your part. And I was actually thinking about that, when in relation to us now having Phrasehoff and having paid off the first 4. We own 4 outright, and that's because because all of you and our friends have contributed a little, and then boom, it's a lot. And that's the way that civilization works. Each man holds his part of the shield wall, and and between all of us, we prevail.
Well, so something else that another strange path this takes us down is something that I have often thought about as being one of the reasons that Eastern religion is so very self-denying, like the goal is to become one with like nothingness or whatever, but the ego death of your individuality, it's coming out of a set of cultures to where people are just stacked upon top of people, upon top of people, on top of people, with sewage running in the streets from their excessive defecations in the drinking water and whatever else. And it's not a great existence. And the other thing is there's such a hyperabundance of creatures that the individual worth of a person isn't there. You don't run into people that know your name at the store, that your kids do go to school together, that you have those things, because just the odds are you're in an endless sea of, and it's helped that those people are very hard to differentiate between. You chuckle, but I'm not wrong. It's a thing. And I think that's something very special about us, that we do celebrate the individual as much. Our concept of salvation in its most obvious, I think, to the listener's form of the Einherjar, in the name, speaks to individuality. The singular warrior, someone who's distinguished themselves from the pack. And I think that's really important. And I think it's a fundamental to Asatru that sets us apart from many other religions in our world today.
And Western civilization. You know, we talked last time about the Faustian bargain and this Western restlessness that we have, that, you know, to get out and be that rugged individual out there on the tip of the spear, and rightly so. But you know, the downside of that, in the context of Mouse Utopia, is that, you know, we have provided, the hard men that have come before us have provided, you know, Pax Anglorum, which is, you know, the English peace, throughout our part of the civilization. So we don't know hard times. We have a super abundance of everything. And, you know, so we just have that coalescence of tracks that have put us where we have, you know, all this food and no enemy in sight.
But and without the social structure supporting the other things. So if you eliminate the struggle, then you create high ideal. You celebrate artists and theologians and heroes, and, you know, all of us can name any number of useless, you know, actors or quote unquote musical artists or whatever else. And again, don't get me wrong, there are some really tremendous actors. There are some other people that just look good and get a bunch of roles. There are some people that are tremendous at making music. There are other people that, you know, just make some one-hit wonders that we kind of sing along to. And I have fun with that too. But none of us know the name of any Medal of Honor winner in the last 80, 90 years. At a different time, we would all know the greatest warriors of our folk. Those people would be celebrated, and, you know, parades in their honor, and, you know, bestowal of medals and things before the king and before, you know, crowds of adoring peasantry and things. No, we don't celebrate those kind of things. You know, in a different vein, we don't know the name of scientists unless they're like Black Science Man that has like a show or an entertainment thing that's adjacent. We don't know the names of people who achieve great things unless they are like Elon Musk and they are so far in their achievement that it's undeniable and they own lots of stuff that you can't avoid it. So it's our challenge is to find ways to actualize within the abundance that our ancestors have provided us. And I think the AFA does a very good job of providing that and structuring towards that. I'll mention that none of us are perfect, and the AFA is certainly not perfect, but we're more perfect today than we were 2 years ago. We were more perfect 2 years ago than we were 20 years before that. This time next year when I talk to you guys, hopefully we're even closer towards that goal than we are now. That's always the goal. But I think we're making an active stride towards it. And this is a very good opportunity for people to be involved in something with a grander purpose, something bigger than themselves, something to gain the attention of the gods and to make the ancestors proud and to build lasting things for our children and their children. And we're absolutely doing that. And we'd invite you to be part of doing that with us.
And that's actually one of the cornerstones of happiness is to have purpose. Where everything's handed to you, you have no purpose, which is why, there are some millionaires, and some of them have been criticized. I think it's Bill Gates who said, his kids are not getting anything, but because he has recognized, I don't want to give him much laurels, although he's right about population, but, the only way that you can recognize that self-worth is to struggle against against the forces that every person, that every civilization struggles against. It's the struggle for self-realization, and the struggle against becoming the NPC who just overindulges in the mindless entertainment and the hyperabundance of food that we have, and slacks back off. And it's a relentless battle, but that's where discipline comes in, and certainly that's where the AFA can help everyone, help all of us maintain that sense of identity and maintain that sense of purpose. It certainly gives me a sense of purpose to be able to play my part in manifesting the greatness that we have done over the last 20 years.
Well, it's a funny kind of accidental turn of phrase or whatever, but yes, it will help you and it will help us. And ideally, we help each other to achieve that. One of the beautiful things I think about the AFA is that we have a group of people that are very committed to seeing each other succeed. And I've watched that in so many different ways, both great and small, of AFA members helping one another to be the best they can be, to achieve, to succeed, to break through blockages, to overcome obstacles, and to become more than we were, and to reciprocate that back and forth to where we all rise up because we're all helping each other. Something I was remiss to do. Leroy from Michigan donated $100 to Phrasehoff. Thank you very much.
Right.
We appreciate you. I'm sorry it took me so long to acknowledge your donation, but you're awesome. Thank you so much for that. Something that this also, again, this topic, the Mouse Utopia thing, touches on everything in some it's so much of our life struggle in society and such a poignant microcosm. So the overriding theme of our folk, of our faith, and of this that we do is the struggle against chaos, the chaos that comes from entropy. You have to stay in motion. You have to stay striving to spiral upwards, because the default state is a spiral towards disintegration and chaos and a breakdown of order, a breakdown of society, a breakdown of everything else. That's shown completely in the Mouse Utopia. And the spiral in, creatures with that short of a lifespan, you see that happen real quick. If we are not doing things to push ourselves forward, then we are being pulled backwards. And that pull is not always even. We see it in different facets of life, different facets of society, but it is sure and it is, you know, eternal. So finding ways to get ourselves to move forward, because you have to, even on simple things. So we talk about, it's easy to get lost in big historical contexts, like, we need to go, you know, conquer Russia. We need to go, you know, bring the, you know, Somaliland under our subjugation. We need to go like do these great things. A lot of the time, no, you just need to get up, get your clothes on, and get out of the house. Maybe you don't have to get out of the house that day because you don't need to for your job, but it's good for you to get out of the house. No, you need to go to the gym, not because you need to battle, you know, wild beasts, but because you don't want to be a fat slob. You need to make the efforts to do good things and to accomplish stuff, not because you have to, but because you should. Because on the other side of it, you are better for it and you've gained fame amongst people that appreciate it. And then that comes back to the Sigerheim idea in Tennessee, trying to build community. In the AFA, we have a substantial community. It's separated by miles by space, but it's much more densely populated than it once was, and that gets better every day. What we would like to see people do, to the best of everybody's ability, get closer to your fellow AFA members. We mentioned our 5 HOFs. If you're able and you want to have community that you don't have, move to one of the spaces that we have a HOF and are building a community around it. I would encourage everyone who can to move to Jackson County, Tennessee, where we are deeply engaged and invested in building community. My family will be out there as soon as possible. Hopefully many of our leadership and many of our membership will follow that and come out there and be part of it. But if you can't, we got 5 other options of places that you can move towards to be closer to people in your area. And as we continue, as your generosity continues, as our faith continues, these centers of community, these HOFs, will occur in more and more places, closer and closer to our members that find themselves alone. The, you know, creation of community and gathering ourselves together and banishing the idea of alienation is part of our declaration. It's part of what we're all engaged in, and it's what we're doing. And we invite you again to be a part of it.
Well, and, you know, I thought that Michigan was pretty close to Ohio, although since I rarely venture north of the line, I was not really sure how exactly close it was. But Leroy can come on December 6th and come down and see, because it looks like it's pretty close, unless he's a Yupa up there. You know,
the ferry ride short.
Exactly. And they're, as everyone knows when they come to a HOF, I mean, that's how you build community IRL, as the kids say. You know, it's being together in meet space with other people, other right thinking people. And it really shocks me anymore if I spend much time out there in NPC culture. I realize how magnificent a community that we have built with the people who have dug through these questions of society and civilization and religion and come to all the right answers about what the problems are and how to solve it. So the other part, in addition to being online and, you know, chatting with each other on Rumble or TikTok or whatever, you know, is coming out to the HOFs on each third Saturday and seeing and meeting and talking with some of the greatest people that you'll ever meet, because it really is. It's like a homecoming, and then once you've integrated into the culture, it really does feel like home. A lot of the rest of my time is spent waiting to get back to the Hoff, because that's where the real is. Family first, Hoff.
So the one can lead to the other. And that's, I suppose, a worthwhile thing to mention. So this is kind of the conundrum earlier. Yes, you need to mate and make children, but you need to make children that look like the rest of us. And it's ideal for you to make those children with people who share your values at a fundamental level. I have watched too many people that I know go through hellish circumstances because they made poor choices and compromises on the people they chose to start a family with. If you come to the Hoffs, it is absolutely a thing. I've watched lots of families built within the Asatru Folk Assembly. Doesn't mean if you make your way out of the Hoff, you're going to necessarily find the love of your life, but you could, and some have.
And that may be a time like we could suggest to our lady folk out there to start bringing some of their friends, because there are many more women in Asatru than there used to be. Mm-hmm. Certainly since I started doing it in 2005, we have had a welcome influx of families and ladies. But you're still outnumbered. And so if for no other reason than to bring yourself back into parity, where there are more women to have a voice and so that you have other ladies to talk to, bring some friends.
So
these guys have a hard time meeting. And I would find myself in that same spot if I wasn't, an old dude that, that late in life. I mean, it's a tough go to meet normal women out there now, because they've been sucked into the trifecta of mind virus. Is that the right word? The viruses out there that are afflicting Western civilization are accelerated in the minds of women. And
they are.
So, please find some normal women and bring them.
Absolutely. And what I'm saying, you can do that. Women are doing that. They're bringing their friends. It gains a momentum. Women, when they see other women and families at AFA events and they show those pictures to their friends, the friends see that, they're more likely to come around. And so they have. It gets better all the time. And numerous families that I know were started in the Asatru Folk Assembly in just such a situation. So I would encourage everybody to do that. That is a place where the internet is a tremendous tool to reach across distance, to maintain relationships, to locate people at distance that share your values, and then to adjust your meat space, pun intended, I suppose, to work out the way it needs to be. And I say that, but I say that as someone who lived in Alaska. Mandy lived in Florida. We met at Winter Nights in Pennsylvania. A month and a half later, I'd packed everything and moved down to Florida to make that happen. It can absolutely happen. And, here we are. I've got a math. Fortunately, Mandy's not grumpy about that kind of thing. 8 years married and, got a beautiful 5-year-old daughter, and we're so blessed because of it. So it absolutely happens. So we got some questions tonight. First one: why do you use stoles for your priests? It's a weird choice for a Nordic religion to use a garment synonymous with Roman Catholicism. Why not use something more appropriate? So I don't stipulate that it's inappropriate. I think that it's quite appropriate. Secondly, there's a couple reasons. I want to throw those reasons out as why, as I'm the guy that made that call. And a couple of few things. I get that we all have seen Catholic priests that have stoles on. I will stipulate that. But like so much of Catholicism, that's not a biblical thing. It's not a Jewish thing. It is absolutely a pagan European thing. It traces its roots to Latin paganism, and it's something that was worn to show wisdom and like accumulated knowledge. Now, that was accumulated within the priesthood, but we see kind of dual traditions of that, to where ecclesiastical use through the Catholic Church happens, but also academic use in, it's why everyone at graduation wears stoles. It's from that same root. And that root has nothing to do with the Middle East or Christianity. But it's also something to know. It has become what men of the cloth wear, to where it's something that is recognizable as a religious vestment. Hindus also wear stoles. That's something that the Hindus notably do as a non-Abrahamic thing. Again, it comes from Aryan roots. But it means something to the people that see it. It means that, oh, this person is a priest. What they're doing is priest stuff. And people take that seriously. I'm not sure what costuming, or, to be more generous, what wardrobing you'd think would be more appropriate. But I doubt that it would get the same reaction when you're going into a hospital to minister to someone who's at the end of their life, or when you're going in to do prison ministry, or when you're interacting with society at large. They know that that means you are a religious person doing a religious function, and there is a value to that that's afforded you. I'm not opposed to other things that also accomplish that, but a stole is a European religious thing. And because the religion of Europe for 1,000 years was Christianity, I can see why there's mental overlap there. But it's not a biblical garment, and it is one that comes from European paganism. Alan, do you have any thoughts on that?
I agree with you wholeheartedly what you said about the vestment, the stole, and there's also the parallel to us making the hammer sign, where I haven't heard about it lately, but in a long time ago, the hammer sign that we make in the 4 gods that we name, or 3, but there used to be a range of criticism about that being a copy or a knockoff of the Catholics making the sign of the cross. But it is tested, there is testimony in the lore that, and I'm not the lore guy, but I know one of the sagas mentioned that one of the great leaders made the sign of the hammer over the food. And so it could just as easily be, just like with the stole, it could just as easily be that the Catholics stole the making the sign of the cross from the heathens who were making the sign of the hammer. And I see absolutely no downside to repurposing those things. We could say the same thing. Why do you worship in a church? Because it's the expected thing to do. Some things are normal for a reason, and I'm always careful about using that word and that concept. But some things are, just because it's normal doesn't mean it's not okay. So having the vestment is a good thing.
Well, and it's very, and I think, we've all had those kind of concepts, especially when we come from something else and find this anew. If you leave, and I'm not suggesting that the one asking the question feels this way or doesn't. This is kind of for everybody out there listening. In the early days of modern Asatru, also in the early days of, a great many of us who came to Asatru from something else, there is a tendency to rebel against whatever that something else is, and in doing so, throw the baby out with the bathwater. The problem with Christianity isn't the stole or the cathedral or the priesthood or the whatever. It's Jesus. It's the doctrine. It's that. Something that you notice when people accuse us of being too Christian, I think they mean we're too serious, because serious white people practicing serious religion tend to look a certain way. And I don't think any of that is a biblical thing. I don't think any of the elements that you find in that are biblical. I think what you find as a point of commonality is pious white people engaged in worship looks a certain way. And I think, that's as it should be. And I think I would also encourage everybody to read The Germanization of Early Medieval Christianity. And, who would have thunk it, but it's about the Germanization of early medieval Christianity. It's about how much the early church in Europe appropriated, adopted practice and tradition from the various branches of Arian paganism they found in order to facilitate very proud people in doing something that's so very different from their folk custom. They painted it in the customs of our folk to make it appealing. And that's, still with us today in more ways than I think many people would realize. We also have, coming from not being religious for years and new to Asatru, what are some suggestions on becoming more pious within Asatru? What would you suggest, Lawspeaker?
The one thing I always suggest to individuals seeking to increase their feeling of kinship with the gods is to create an altar at home. I can see mine from here. But it's, I have my hammer. I have, a couple of bells. I have pictures of my ancestors, and candles. And every morning I light a candle and do a little devotional to my ancestors. And in doing so, that honors the gods. I think that we honor the gods also, and primarily by remembering our folk, by remembering our own people. Your own grandparents are, your direct lineage that lead you to the All-Father. And so by remembering them and giving them fealty and honor, you also honor the gods. And by having an altar, it makes it more real. There's a physical manifestation of items that you care about and items that represent and therefore manifest your fealty and and give you that ability to recollect, how you are every time you walk by that altar. So that's a start, is to have an altar and to do some form of worship there every day. I mean, that's there have been several movies that I've seen where just as an aside, like the Roman legionnaire, when he's like every morning he's got a little roll and he unrolls and he's got his little idols that he does, that he does stuff with. and so he's practicing his ancestral faith, which helps to integrate him into the whole of that religious practice. And that I think is an important first step. And that, along with having a morning prayer, a morning devotional, a morning meditation, ideally, that again helps you manifest that real. I know that that Founder McDowell says the Sikh Driftmaw every morning, and when you hail the day and realize that this reality is a gift from the gods, that our consciousness is Odin's gift to us, then you are bringing that realness, that reality of that practice into yourself every day.
Yeah, what Alan said, I think altar work is a big step. I think something else that's very important is trying to think of the best way to phrase it. You have to approach it with a certain level of openness. It's difficult when people who are not used to faith, spirituality in general, approach these things, because there's an intellectual bias there, like you have to empirically prove certain things or not. I would ask you to reject that premise and just be open and see what happens. You asking the question tells me that you want to fully engage in Asatru. If you're dishonest and pretend you have a sincerity of faith that you don't have, I think that dishonesty is also a blockage. But what I think is really important to do is to open yourself up, open your mind, open your heart when you approach your altar, or if you're able to be in ritual with other people, and see what happens. You don't need to pretend that you have a greater faith than you have, but you also need to be open to wanting to have that faith. You need to give it. You can't go in saying, this is silly. I guess I'll do this silly thing. Well, you're going in with the wrong attitude. You have to go into it saying, I really want this to be a thing. I really want to develop a relationship with the gods. Here I am. This is where I'm at. Here is an offering. I hope that you accept it. I want to build relationship with you, gods, and see where that goes. And it really can start out just that simple. That was something that helped me a lot when I came to Asatru. But I had been, acquainted with religion before that, so it wasn't, I don't think, as difficult of a transition as perhaps it is for somebody who's not a person of faith or who hasn't been in the past to becoming one. But I would also advise you from day one to focus your mindset towards the gods. In ritual, speak to the gods, not about the gods, but to the gods. Leave an offering as a gift to a living, sentient entity that is receiving your gifts. Don't just go through the motions. Go through them with the intent of interacting with something that is real, that is conscious, and that interacts with you. That's very important. And I would also refocus your way of seeing things, not to be an academic pursuit. Pursuing academics is fine, but the focus in your mind should be, am I making the gods proud or not? Are the gods pleased with what I'm doing or are they not? What would the gods want me to do? Those kind of thoughts are pious. Too many people get overwhelmed with the study of history or the study of whatever else, and they focus on some kind of an authentic replication of ancient practices That's not the point. The reason that ancient people did those practices was because of the things just mentioned, to make the gods proud of them, to get the gods' attention, to please the gods. That should be your focus. All the rest of it can inform that and enhance that, but it should never, ever supplant that. That always needs to be the second thought, not the first thought.
If you build it, they will come.
And that's the thing. If you're open, and I've seen this happen, and I will say it, this miraculous thing happen time and time again, where people give it a good shot. They're honest about where they're at. They go in to bloat wanting to build a relationship and very open to one. And, every now and again, something amazing happens. You see their eyes light up to where they thought it was real. They wanted it to be real. Oh, wow, this is real and hit me in the face. And I hope that you're lucky enough to have that kind of an experience. I hope you're lucky enough to have many of those experiences. But you can't force them. You do have to be open to them and able to recognize them when they come your way. So something I wanted to mention too that I saw over in side chat. Silver Cellusid. Awesome. I'm glad that you joined. I'm glad that you joined the AFA, and I'm very excited that you're going to attend your first moot here in tomorrow, I guess, in Eastern Pennsylvania. That's awesome.
Yes.
I wish you the very best in that. I'm excited that you took that step and that you're a member. Welcome to the family. We are glad to have you. So, question coming in from Jill. Matt and Alan, could the AFA host socials so our teens and young adults can meet, like a modern day cotillion? Yes, we absolutely could. The problem has been and remains distance. It's something, as a matter of fact, in talking about the new Hoff that Whitten Erickson and myself were just talking about, a little over a week ago. We definitely want to do that. We want to do that at big events. We certainly want to do that at Sigerheim, Tennessee, when we can get, a certain critical mass of our folks together, even if they come from little ways around. We absolutely want to do that. And it's exciting because we're starting to get enough kids of similar age in similar areas to where that's a viable thing to start thinking about. So yes, I absolutely want to do that. Alan, do you have any thoughts on that?
No, I think that's a great idea. But like you said, it's geography is a challenge. If we were all closer together, it would be so super easy. And I'd be interested to hear whether if that's the same Jill, if her 11-year-old managed to punch that dude out that was giving him a hard time in Scouts, because I've actually thought about that, and I hope that that worked out well for him and for them, because that's the kind of stuff that can really improve a young man's standing in his own eyes. Even taking an ass whooping is better than standing down all the time.
Gold Maple. I came to see Matt. How is Matt doing? Thank you for that. Matt's doing all right. I'm doing pretty good. I look forward to Wednesday nights every week. I get to be here with some of my very best friends, and that certainly includes our Lawspeaker here. And I get to talk about something that I truly love. So I am doing great. I hope you're doing well also. Speaking of altars, has the AFA considered selling idols or shrine pieces on their store? Oftentimes, when looking for idols, I find stuff made in China, or even worse, by traitorous pagans. So Yes, we're revamping our store. Finding and sourcing those kind of things is really difficult. Having membership that makes some of those things is really difficult. We do have a member in Sweden that makes some really nice idols. With shipping and things internationally, it is a very difficult prospect to stock his items in our store. Currently, Witten Erickson is running our store and restocking it. For anybody who is curious, our AFA store is up and running with flags and some books and some items that we currently have. But we're working on getting that figured out. The other thing that has been a big problem with the store is figuring out shipping. Shipping costs have drastically increased, so we are trying to figure out how best to navigate that. But that's certainly something we're very, very open to.
And the other thing about idols in particular, or store items in general, it's just like what we've talked about with our hofs or with any sacred space. The source of it is a lot less important. I mean, believe me, I wish we had, some AFA craftsmen that were, doing these castings or carvings. If there were people that were capable of that, there's certainly plenty of market for it, obviously. But regardless of the source, when you get it home and put it in your altar and wash it and bless it and endow it to your use, the source of it is a lot less important than how you treat it and how you interact with it. Realizing that ultimately it is a symbol. I mean, that's not Thor on your altar. That is a means of you tuning into the manifestation.
Absolutely that. So Jackson, Tennessee is where we are building the AFA town. So as I saw a little bit in the chat, but I think anybody who might be confused, do not be misled. There is a city in Tennessee called Jackson. That is not where we are at. We're in the county of Jackson. We're in Jackson County, Tennessee. Closest place you find is Whitleyville, but Whitleyville is like a tire shop and a post office. I think it's not a lot of.
And a Dollar General.
There's a Dollar General. Is it in fact in Whitleyville? That's the thing. It's kind of deceptive. The closest town that I think you would recognize as a town is Gainsboro, and it's a beautiful little town. But yeah, Jackson County, Tennessee is where we have property. Building a town, there's existing town there, but establishing a community, absolutely. Many of us are trying to move there and really be a presence there and be fully engaged in the community and, active and support one another, engage in life with our fellow AFA members outside of just, the once a month at the Hof. When we get there, we'd like to do stuff together often. And the closer we are to something, where there will be a Hof and a hall, we can gather at that weekly. We can gather at that however many times we want. That's one of the beauties of fixing the proximity problem. But it does mean many of us picking up and moving into, uncertain territory and making our way. And I want you guys to understand, I get that. And I am not, we're not creating this in Reno, Nevada. I too am packing up something that's working pretty good to go and pursue this dream, because it's very important and it's essential that we do so and that we make it happen. And I think that if we are putting forth all the right effort on our end, then I think trusting in the ICEER, they will, align for some really beautiful things to happen in our way. And I think we'll be very well rewarded for that. So I'm very excited about it. And yes, that's where many of us are heading that way. And it's where the producer of this program, Nick Rice, has already made the effort and, put it all on faith and on fate and packed up and headed down there and established a beachhead for us. So we're very appreciative of that as well.
And if rural Tennessee is not your cup of tea, then you could move to Youngstown, Ohio, and be within walking distance of Frazehoff.
Move to Austintown, Ohio. Because that's where the white folks live.
Right, I know. Or you could move to White Springs, Florida, where Yordeshoff is.
A beautiful town.
It is a beautiful town and a beautiful off with some beautiful people, and I'm there too.
But maybe Florida's not your taste. Well, you're in for a treat. You could also move to Brownsville, California. You could move to Linden, North Carolina.
Another beautiful town.
Also, absolutely. Or if you want to enjoy the ice and the snow, you can move to Baldershoff in lovely Murdock, Minnesota.
That's right.
So, we kid, but it's not out of the realm of something to do. It's something that everybody absolutely should do. The closer we have people there, we have seen something really special happen when we have Hoffs. The community really does start to take root, and it provides a context to live out our values in a way supported by our brothers and sisters in this faith. It's a very special thing. And if you haven't gotten to experience it, it's well worth doing. People regularly travel 3 hours to our Hoffs to just be part of that for one day a month. Closer in you are, the more often you get that interaction, and it's well worth it. So we got a couple of things. We have some emails coming in. Good evening. All's here you go through Matt, Lawspeaker Allen, and Folk Builder Nick. How are you all doing tonight? Doing well. My question is, what's the essence of being a man? And then a second question, what's the essence of being a woman? Alan, what is the essence of being male and what is the essence of being female?
I can't speak to the latter, as I am not one, and would tend to reply to that in ways that would sound flippant but are merely wisecrackery. I think the essence of being a man is, in many ways, is just to be able to stand your ground and make your way. I mean, when I think of that, and there's no one thing, but to be fully a man, I think you have to have some wherewithal to defend yourself in a physical altercation. I think you have to have the wherewithal to, pay your rent every month, keep a roof over your head. And I think you have to have a sense of nobility, maintaining the idea that you keep your word, that you that you live a life of virtue and honor. And I think all of those things, and snips and snails and puppy dog tails are combined in the mix to make you a man.
So I have got a couple of simple thematic answers. The truth is something very, very complex. And I think we all know that to be true. It is fashionable to just throw up our hands. Who's to say? There's lots of different definitions of what one person might find manly, and that's nonsense. We all know what it means. Putting it into words that we all agree upon doesn't negate the truth that is self-evident that we all realize. So there's a very complex matrix of things that displays in very different and beautiful ways about what it is to be a man and what it is to be a woman. But I would think if it boils down to singular word or concept in both things, I think the essence of being a man is mastery. And I would say that in a lot of different contexts. I think it is a fundamental of manhood that you find ways to master your circumstance, your environment, yourself, your impulses, your emotions, your wants, your dreams, your person, finding a way to shape order out of the chaos you find yourself in, and be able to provide that order through your mastery to the women and children in your orbit, however that manifests, most often in a spouse and in your offspring, but also for the community at large. You being able to be that source of strength and of order in a chaotic world is a fundamental of masculinity that I think, that I would choose as the way to encapsulate that. And I think in the essence of women, again, I'm not a woman, but I think that I would say devotion. I think women find their great ascendancy in their devotion to their families, to their husband, to caring for it, because it's one of the ways that we see our Githyas perform their function a little bit different than the Gothar, I would say, in their tending of the community, their devotion to that congregation, their devotion to the God of their temple in a very particular taking care of the Hof community way. I think you see that mothering, that tending of things, that devotion in the raising of children, in the supporting of husbands, in the supporting of community. We've talked a lot on this program about how women have a very special ability to manipulate social circumstances by deciding who to show favor to, who to not show favor to, how to weave frith between men that might have a grievance amongst them, being able to weave together that family because they are devoted to the success of a family, of a congregation, of a people. I think that's a fundamental to womanhood. Also, just because it's the same Austin emailing us, are Antifa members white? This is a theme. He picks out a group of folks, sometimes people, sometimes earth fauna, to ask if they are white or not. Alan, are Antifa members white?
In the broadest definition, I guess, you'd have to say by all the televised filming that I've seen of them, I think the vast majority of them are of white descent. I would say they are traitors to their race and to their nation by the way that they conduct themselves. So they are the essence of the chaos that we stand against.
So I know that the question itself was a joke, but it illustrates some things that I think are worth mentioning. Yes, Antifa members are overwhelmingly white. They are, however, not Aryan. Yet they have the building blocks of genetic Aryanness. There's nothing noble about them, but they are in in our faith, there's a concept of murk and leos. There's light and dark, and that's describing natures of things. There'll be, like the wolf displayed, ulfr in a noble, this noble beast that we respect its awesome attributes and its ingenuity and its ability as a hunter and all these things. And then there's the vargar, which is the merc side of the wolf, to where they're akinning for a bandit or a criminal, and they scavenge things, and they poach your hard tended to crop, or herd rather. And you see Antifa as the antithesis of what we want to be, and of like the kind of full evolution of chaos taking hold. When you allow entropy to take hold and you become at the sway of whatever popular social current, you find these very, very sickly, disgusting, profoundly unhappy people that spew that unhappiness onto the rest of society, and very often destroy their life and everyone else's life around them, until eventually they often end up taking their life, because they're very, very broken and malignant creatures at that point. I think in a way it's like Lord of the Rings, when Gollum like mutates into this creepy creature. When you let the worst side of yourself take hold and become the dominant portion of you, it leads in a really sad and gross direction. Anecdotally, one of our members a number of years back, there is a Globo Homo Universalist pagan organization called the Trove. And because they were so scared of the COVIDs, that they, as far as I know to this day, host virtual moots where they're in mom's basement but still wearing masks and such. He, paid the minimal entrance fee to be part of this virtual meeting, and took a screenshot of like the Brady Bunch screen with the people in the different little corners or whatever. And it was exactly the caricature of what you think it might be. Everyone on there was a picture of illness and dysfunction. They were all obese. They were almost all gender ambiguous to the point of where you're just guessing. They all had the like faded out pink, green, not vibrant because it's not well taken care of dyed hair, and the, crazy facial piercings, and they all look, but not only were they all dysfunctional, they all shared the same like flavor of that. And that's kind of what you see with the Antifa crowd. So yeah, they're a shining example of what happens when you let chaos rule your person and where this heads. And I think it is a chilling dystopia that none of us want to find ourselves in.
I think that, in a certain way, I feel sorry for them.
Sure.
They've certainly been misled by, they've been miseducated, they've been misled by popular culture. They've just fallen victim to the trap that is modern civilization, that just leads you away from all of that. And I just think it's because they can't concentrate. I think they've lost their ability to focus. They can't hold one thought in their head for more than a couple of seconds. That's why they can't frame context to these big pictures, like why we shouldn't let illegal immigrants in the country, or whatever the fight this week is about. I think we would do them all a favor if we could organize like some kind of retreat somewhere, maybe out in the country, like a camp where we could teach them how to concentrate.
I will let you host that particular retreat. I
Filtration camp.
yeah, there is something absolutely to be pitied, and I don't think as much with the older people that find themselves involved in that, but I think a lot of young people had this um, put into them by abusive means, pun kind of intended, that's led to where they find themselves. And I think that's really, really sad.
I think it'd be interesting to find out how many of them are from broken homes. I think
All
right in some form or another of that definition. But I think if you haven't had a father figure in the home that you can look up to see what right thinking and right control and honor and discipline looks like, I think that can lead to that sort of
so
aberrancy.
something that's a really unfortunate truth, and I meant this a little bit ago, and this is kind of the nature of chaos. I think anecdotally we've all heard the hurt people or misery loves company, both of which are true. The Antifa crowd and that the woke crowd take to the furthest limits. They are very, very unhappy people. And it's as if they are waging a war against happiness itself. Every choice that they make is almost intentionally a choice of the most degeneracy and on the least satisfaction and the least happiness. And this very much crosses the boundary of the transsexual mental illness that we find so forced upon us lately in recent years. These people, and I don't just mean the trannies, I mean people who are that hyper woke that that's become their identity, are a very, very high percentage of suicides because something is very deeply broken. And I think a lot of those people try to outpace the broken by their activism, but tearing down everything that we like doesn't fix what's broken internally within them. And when they find themselves in the stillness of their own thoughts or whatever, when they try to go to bed at night or whatever they do, they can't escape the dysfunction that's rotted them out from the inside. And it's a very cautionary tale to the rest of us to avoid that. What else we got? If it's not too long of a story, what led to Jackson County being picked? How many places did y'all scope out first? Alan, tell your part of that story, or what the story is from your perspective on that, if you would.
Dude, that's your story. Daniel's not here to tell it, but I mean, I
think Tennessee was on your short list.
It was on the short list because it's I think there's still a lot of old time tradition there. It has very lenient land use laws, and the people are still very traditionalist minded. Just for an example, I mean, this certainly didn't come into us picking Tennessee, but one time, the last ceremony we were up there for, maybe not the last one before, but there was one of the bars in Cookeville, which is the nearest town of any size, meaning like 50,000 people. One of the bars tried to have a drag show, and the cops, instead of coming down and defending the people who were having the drag show, like would happen in most of the cities, they shut the bar down. They found a reason to shut the bar down because their paperwork wasn't in order. So however we ended up there, it is definitely the right spot.
So a number of things go into play on a decision like that. And I meant this earlier. I always want to make sure we are doing our best and also asking for the gods to give us guidance. And I think about that when we get Hoffs or when there's any major AFA decision. I don't want to, let Jesus take the wheel and abdicate my responsibility to make a good choice. But I also want to, while doing my best to make a good choice, ask that the ICEER show me the way to what would bring them glory or what they approve of, and to dissuade me if I'm going to take a path they don't approve of. And I think that is very helpful. I think anytime something works out, it's because the ICEER have provided their guidance to us. And I think anytime something doesn't work out, it's because I screwed up. Tennessee, as a general rule, it's a couple of things. No sales tax, or not sales tax, no state income tax, rather, is a big thing. I didn't want to be in a state with state income tax for, all kind of practical reasons. Finding it was important to a number of us who plan on being some of the root population there, and myself in particular. I want to be, I'd like to be in Dixie. I think that's important culturally and values-wise. Being in Dixie that's less humid, arguably, is nice, even though it gets real humid in the summer. Having topography matters. There's a lot of places down south that are very, very flat. I need hills and topography. I think those are good for our people. I think they're good in general. So that was part of it. I think the laws in Tennessee were very favorable. It was one second. All right, so the laws are very favorable and good there. They're consistently very solidly conservative. I don't think that you can bank on that, but you got to pick a good place to start. And I think it's a real good starting point. We've seen a lot of places that doesn't last forever or whatever, but you got to choose something. And I think that's a strong indicator of it being a relatively safe place for families, for us to build a future with people that have a sense of tradition, a sense of traditional values. Demographics looked nice. Also, so that all of that kind of put us in Tennessee, not Jackson County in specific. And then we started, just pricing out places, seeing what we get for our money, what stuff is for sale, where are their things. As that progressed, we, with our Hoffs or with Sigerheim, this is a difficult thing for me because I'm sitting out here in Reno, thousands of miles away. And so I got to have other people go do a lot of the looking of these spots. Now I'm trying to scout them from distance and Google Maps and Google Earth and, look up all the stuff. But we have to have somebody boots on the ground doing these things. So Whit Daniel Young was my point guy on going out and looking at properties and getting this figured out. And we had the help of a wonderful realtor in the area. And she has been very helpful to us. And so, if anybody is seriously considering getting something out there, talk to us and we'll try to get you connected because I'd love to, give as much business her way as we can. But yeah, we were led to a number of spots there. And there were a couple of different properties in Jackson County and that we looked at. And we wanted to send our man Daniel out there to check them out. this is the spot that kind of came up that had all of the optimal things. I remember while he was there walking it with whoever the listing agent was, he was, amazing. We could get the signal on top of the different ridge lines, trying to get, FaceTime with me so I'd see it. He was so nervous trying to make the call because he was the guy on point making the call. And then he was like, oh, they're going to be mad at me and whatever. No, it's beautiful. It's wonderful. It's the perfect spot. I'm very, very happy about it. And we've got amazing things that we're going to build from there. So things turn out good when you do the work, but you also trust in the gods. Oh, and you asked how many places. I'd say that we had, I can remember 5 or 6 different properties that were on our short list of him like driving out and walking and kind of taking a look at. Gilbert. Thank you, Gilbert. Gilbert donated $150 towards Phrasehoff.
Good man.
Much appreciated. It's always much appreciated. You are awesome. Thank you so much. What would be your advice for someone who was raised around the troth-like people, and are struggling to maintain a more noble existence while not passing on these poisoning tendencies to their kids? So, question, and we'll answer it in the meantime, but if you're over in the chat asking it, if you could tell us your age, I think that would help too. But Alan, what say you?
Well, I think the easy first step, of course, is just to thank the gods that you have found your way to the AFA. As we say sometimes, to say folkish Asatru is redundant. Whatever it is that the troth is doing, it's not Asatru. Some made up stuff that to try to help themselves feel better about their lives, which won't ever work. The other part of it, I think, is you can just realize, thank your ancestors, thank your Disseer for steering you out of that, and thank your your Odinic consciousness for giving you the perception to see that is the wrong path. To hold them up to hold the troth attack as a negative example of this is what we are not. That's a good way to make a nice clean break from that poisonous existence. But at the same time, I don't think you should dwell very much on that. We've all made mistakes. You've recovered from yours. You have found your way to the honest place of veneration of your gods, and live in joy and gratitude for having found your way home. And those other people, who cares?
Yeah, so I think that you are uniquely positioned in a way to see what that is and where that goes. And you can also recognize its creep when you see it. I think you speak with a certain authority because you've seen that up close and you've experienced that. When you talk about not wanting to pass that on to your kids, you have a point of reference that a lot of the rest of us may not have. Now, there's some of us that are very, very strong in our beliefs, but there's a lot of, I hate to say it, ladies, I apologize, but there's a lot of specifically women out there that are fairly easily manipulated out of compassion to compromise on some core values. And I think you have seen where that leads in a way that is authentic. And it's not you projecting what you think it's like, but you being raised around that can, no, this is how this starts. Let's not do that. I think you're able to speak with an authenticity earned by experience that some of the rest of us don't have when trying to make that case to our children or children in general. I think that's valuable. I think you're able to, hearken to a lived experience that gives power to your words. I think that's very important. Again, I think it's not, because some people ask this about, coming to Asatru as if they need to, okay, well, I've had to embrace all of this foreign different stuff in Christianity. Okay, what foreign different stuff do I need to embrace for Asatru? And it's really different in the sense that there's things to learn in Asatru, but it's a restoration of the default settings of your soul. You're going back to what's natural and what makes sense. So you don't have to force things. You don't have to try to, forcibly mold yourself into the Asatru mold. As a white man, that mold is within you. It's within your very DNA. You just have to feel confident reverting back to your natural state with those things and working from there. And in a way, if you allow it to be, that's the easiest thing in the world. What's the normal thing to do without the brainwashing by anybody else, including me and Alan? What's the natural thing that makes sense? And I think when you go down that road, it leads you towards authentic Asatru practice. And there's all kind of ways to tighten it up and to evolve it and to learn and to grow. But those very basic fundamentals that you want to pass on to your children are so very natural and very inherent that I think everything is in your favor to cultivate and instill this. Thank you for asking. And yeah, you've seen where it leads and you're in a spot to see that coming and to stave it off. So I'm very confident that you'll be able to do that. Okay, and I think this is an add-on to the question. It's not quite the same. The who cares part is hard because they are my parents and aunts, etc. Alan, do you have anything? I was going to say, do you have anything to add when it's family members like that?
Yikes. You just have to. I think you just have to keep a healthy distance from all that stuff. It sort of reminds me of when my boys were really young, and I mean like infant age, and my mother-in-law, my ex-wife's mother now, would come over there and she's, well, you must just hate the way that I raised you because it was so different. And you just say, no, I'm just, I'm not, it's not about you. This is about me. This is about me and my kids. And I've looked at the civilization that is brought about by those people, and I'm going to do something different. I mean, you just can't make it about being reflexively opposed to them. You just say, I look over here and I see something that I think is better. You just have to make it not about them, and which they will make it all about them because they're going to be hurt by the fact that you've made a different decision. But you just can't let that, them trying to tag you with that sympathy that you can't make it about that. It's not about them. It's about you and the decisions that you've made.
I think all of that Alan said, the respectful, keeping a distance and it's very hard, and I don't want anyone to get the wrong idea that we're suggesting it's not. I am dealing with a similar kind of thing. I wouldn't say quite that far, but my dad and my stepmom are pretty far left. My stepmom's pretty far left, and my dad pretends he's not, but he's drifted pretty far left. And it's hard to find commonality to talk about or to build relationship off of. What I think is really important is that you guard your children against undue influence from their grandparents along those lines, but judiciously, to where you allow them to have as much of a relationship with the grandparents as you can, but also figuring out, if there is any, where your points of commonality are. And even if they're superficial, for the sake of maintaining familial loyalties and, appropriate relations. It's funny, me and my dad will end up talking about, hey, how's the weather up there? It's good. We got a lot of rain this year. Yep. Been raining a little bit down here too. Yeah, well, I'm growing some roses. Yeah, my roses did pretty good this year. Mine didn't bloom so much. We got some rodents up here. That sucks. We don't have a lot of rodents down here. Anyways, good talking to you. Love you, Dad. Talk to you later. It's something, and it counts. It's not the best answer, but it's what we got, and I do think it's better than nothing if we can. And I think demonstrating that you care about family, even and perhaps especially when it's difficult, role models something important to your kids. So there's that. All right. So last question for tonight. What are your thoughts on living with parents as an adult? I recently moved in with some friends, but I'm having second thoughts to move in with my girlfriend's family to help their family pay bills. Alan, I think you might have an interesting perspective.
Yes, as my youngest son lingers on the property, but first of all, I'll say that it is, that it was absolutely the case and one of the things that I've read about, even into the medieval era, that the kids would live with their parents until well into adulthood, for exactly that reason, because they wanted to be established and be able to keep their home and not leave too soon. I think this modern idea of getting out when you're 18, and making a place for yourself is, although admirable if you're able to do it and can do it comfortably. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. But I think it is very much a modern phenomenon. Like one of the things that I used to marvel at, if you go down in some of these old Southern towns, and probably in the North too, I don't imagine it's uniquely a Southern phenomenon. Sorry for using that word twice in the same sentence. But where you see these giant houses, 4, 5, 6,000 square feet. But then, like, when I learned more about those homes later, there would be 3 generations of people living in there. The grandparents were the ones who maybe had the house built to begin with, and their kids were still there, and their kids were there. So there is absolutely no. We're not going to clip a quarter out of your man card for doing the right thing to go and help your girlfriend's parents keep a roof over their head. There's a lot of nobility in that. As long as if you're working and doing your part, she's cleaning and cooking, and you're working and paying part of the bills, have a couple of kids. You got grandparents right there to watch them.
So, Alan, do you remember that ebon-hued fella that ran on "the rent is too damn high" a number of years ago? And he had the gloves.
I do not.
There was a white-haired Negro that was, I believe, running for president, and his whole single-issue campaign, I think, was just to draw attention to it. The rent is too damn high. The rent is, in fact, too damn high. I think one of the things that details matter. If you are deluding yourself and this is not, okay, so first, to the person answering or asking the question, no, you helping your girlfriend's family out through whatever they're dealing with sounds like a real noble thing to do. Be very careful that you don't allow that to build a resentment in you, especially if and when you start your own family with this woman. It's very important that you be the father of your family and not have the in-laws dictate to you how you raise your kid. And I
see the previous question.
Yeah, that's a thing. So some of the traditional multiple families living on the same property, I think in a Roman villa example, sure, but you have your own house and your own acreage and your own space, and you live on this vast property. That there's a lot of ways it can work. There's a lot of other ways where people are living on top of one another, and the proximity ends up breeding a certain amount of contempt and resentment. And I would hate to see that happen. There's all kind of situations, and each of us as noble Aryan men and women have the responsibility to make the best decisions we can in given circumstances. Nothing is perfect, and it's not always a binary, good decision versus bad decision. There's a lot of different factors to consider. And I think that we also need to be honest. There are some people that pretend they're helping out their family by living at home to cloud the reality of, no, they just never moved out of mom's basement. Don't be that guy. But there's other people who you're genuinely helping. Sometimes you're helping family or in-laws that are struggling for a variety of reasons. Sometimes there's medical issues. Sometimes there's a lot of stuff going on, and helping your family is a good thing. Helping the woman that you love's family is a good thing. Family being close together and spending time under one roof and together is a good thing, as long as you can maintain that in a way that's healthy for everybody. So I don't think there's a simple answer to it, but there's a difference between feeling resentful and trapped by something and genuinely making a choice to pursue something. And I think that that's the really important factor. So take that as the answer, and this is kind of a addendum to that. That's a strange segue. We've heard the thing about good men versus nice guys. If you're nice to people because that's your only choice, or else you're going to get your ass kicked, It's not really a kindness, it's a survival mechanism. If you are capable of laying waste to all before you, but you extend kindness to weaker people, that's a nice choice that you are making. A lot of people in the first group confuse and pretend they're in the second group, and the dishonesty between them is what breeds a whole lot of resentment and contempt and internal struggle. So yeah, if you're capable of living on your own and you're choosing to live with your in-laws or your girlfriend's family or whatever to help them out, then that's a noble and a nice thing to do. If you're not capable of it and it's what you're doing to get by, and again, this is not aimed at the guy asking the question. This is to all of the iterations of this situation listening. Recognize that, have the humility to understand and appreciate that, and work to fixing it to where you have the option. Because if you have the option and you make the choice to stay in your spot, that's a lot easier to live with at the end of the day than if you don't have the option and you're kind of deluding yourself on it. So that's an advice I would have on that.
No, and I all of that is well said, and so which caused me to think of this add to my answer to play off what you've said, is that once you decide to do that, do it joyfully and without that lingering sense of resentment. Because if you make the decision, do it in good humor. Because the worst of all worlds is that you do it because and then sit and fume about it and do it with regret, because they will pick up on it, the girlfriend will pick up on it, and nobody, it's absolutely, if it works out for all concerned and you can do it in a place where everybody respects everybody else's boundaries, and you can live a nice healthy lifestyle there, that can be a really great way to get ahead in your life. Save up some money to buy a house, save up some money to buy a car, get out of debt, help them get out of debt, save up for the first baby, the third or fifth baby. And you can do all that while living in place, hopefully where they also respect the contribution that you're making. That's because that's one of the things that, you can't let them book, like if you can't let them feel like it's something where now they owe you, and that too can breed resentment on their part. You can't let that fester either. It's a delicate balance, it sounds like, but if it works out well, it can really help everybody.
Family's always tricky. There's a lot of things to consider. Being mindful of that, and I'd say at most, or at always, you are always best served being honest with yourself about your circumstances, about your motivations, about evaluating where you are. And I want to add to this may not seem, connected, but it really is. When I say be honest with yourself, it's often coupled with, or I guess amended by being brutally honest with yourself. There are a lot of people that think that they're way better than they are, and yeah, they need to get knocked down a few pegs. But I think sometimes we don't realize it also means being honest about your strengths, being honest about where you're successful, not having to worry about people looking at you strange by, puffing up your chest on the things you have to be proud of. So being actually honest with yourself on where you're at, what your circumstance is going to help you navigate a lot through life. At least that's been my experience. Also, shout out to Glitch Lord. Says, really been enjoying these streams, Matt. I'm rejoining the AFA. My application is now pending. Hail all. Well, hail to you. I'm glad you decided to come back. I don't recognize Glitch Lord as the name, so I look forward to seeing who I'm talking to. And I'm glad you've been enjoying the streams. I think it's a good time to remind everybody, if you enjoy these, like, share, subscribe, tell other people who you know that might also enjoy these. We all have circles of friends and family that should be here, might want to be here. Help us bring them home. If people just might find it interesting or a fun way to spend a Wednesday night, we'd love to have them. If this is spiritually edifying and something that is helpful that way, great. If you agree with the stuff we're saying, if you are a heterosexual white person and you would like to come home to the gods of your ancestors and of your very blood, join the Asatru Folk Assembly. Get off the fence. Best time to join is right now. We're doing amazing things. We would be stronger with you, and we would love to have you share in the glorious things that we are doing. So I would encourage everybody, get off the fence, get on the team. We would love to have you guys. runestone.org/join. Let's make it happen. Also, if you want to make the dedication at Phrasehoff in Austintown, Ohio, let's do it. I would love to see you there. If I already know you, then I'd love to, sit down and chat with you and catch up. If I've never met you, I'd love to make your acquaintance. Let's see you there. Lawspeaker, thank you so much for joining us tonight and bringing up a really interesting topic. Always great to talk to you. Do you have any parting commentary for the folk?
Do right and fear no one.
Always solid advice and the motto of Odenshoff District. That said, next week will be a special Brandy episode. She will continue to talk about spooky happenings in theme with the season. I look forward to talking to you in 2 weeks. Until then, hail the Aesir, hail the folk, hail the AFA, and remember, victory never sleeps.